give up, because all things are possible to him who believes. Don't give up. Don't give up. All things are possible to him who believes. I like it. You look at it in the NIV, because when you see all things there, let me show you how it says it so you can understand. It's translated all in the King James because it uses the all-inclusive word. So, which means the NIV gets it right also when it uses the term everything. Because everything means all with the exception of none. So you look at it, it says, if you can, said Jesus, everything is possible for him who believes. Everything is possible. Jesus never exaggerated. Jesus never lied. Everything is possible for him who believes. What do you want today? What's on your mind? What do you want from God? With him, all things are possible. Thank God, thank God. So imagine throughout this month, we can have amazing miracles, extraordinary supernatural interventions of God.
So that is the message, or part of the message of the month. So you need to actually go back and listen to the message again and again throughout the month as you meditate on the message of the month, so that you can get it inside you. It should soak inside your spirit, and you should actually walk with it.
In fact, we actually compel everybody else who watches us to go and study the message, because there's a difference between just listening to the message. Like, for example, today we listen to the message, but now there's a provision for you to actually study the message, and then you have all these other scriptures that were actually given get inside of you such that you become conscious of what will happen, what will be able. For example, the man of God was speaking about supernatural interventions. And, you know, I was taken back to the Hall of Faith. You look at some of the supernatural interventions that have actually happened to our family, our genealogy, and then you also get to hear the words of Jesus Christ to say, greater works than this, or greater things than these shall he do. And if you look at the greater works, it's not something that you've heard, it's something that you've seen. It might be a variant of that thing, but more amplified. And I think when you look at the life of Jesus Christ, you know, he went from one level of those miracles to another, like at this time, it's maybe a child that had actually just died. You'd say maybe a few hours or a few days. And then when you got to Lazarus, it was 4 days, confirmed. You know, when somebody's supposed to be almost smelling and decomposing and decaying. And then when you look at his own miracle when he went to the grave, that's astounding. So it was just, you know, from one level to the other. So you need to actually go back and study, you know. And the Bible says study to be a workman that is rightly dividing. And you have to do that. And we compel everybody to actually go get it in bits and pieces, notebooks, and revert back to the messages that Pastor has taught before on PCDO, because there is a large library of some of the things that you'd have actually just touched. And this is the message that is very, very important for the month, because the month becomes what it's supposed to be if you listen to the words that God has actually given. If you don't, it becomes something else. Like he said, look at the possibilities. If you believe, everything is possible. And this is your master, this is your creator who knows that the men that I created, if they pray and don't give up, they can get as many results as they want, as many as possible.
And speaking of results, you know what the man of God has actually been saying and telling us about the COVID-19 and those who were planning the COVID-19 and how they are not giving up. Well, we prayed and we continue to pray, and we're seeing results. So let me give you an update coming out of Canada. So conservative members of parliament in Canada are pushing for an inquiry into COVID-19 vaccine injuries, stating that Canada is behind other democracies in assessing pandemic policies. Member of Parliament Dean Allison pointed out that over 30 countries have investigated issues like vaccine programs and their economic effects. He mentioned more than 58,000 reported adverse reactions, with over 11,000 serious cases, stressing the need for public examination. He called for a thorough inquiry into vaccine injuries and government decisions made during the pandemic.
You know, there was a division before in vaccinated and unvaccinated, but I think we need to transcend that now, because the reality is we all had actually a very similar experience. We just believe different things. And, you know, I will be generalizing now, but I think we have to understand that people are people and we act the same. And so, you know, just to very generalize, you know, the vaccinated, and again, I appreciate there'll be different degrees, but the vaccinated, many of them honestly believed that there was a dangerous pathogen that posed a lethal threat to them and people that they loved. But there was a solution. There was this vaccine. If only the unvaccinated would take it. Because there was this belief that if the unvaccinated didn't, that they would pose a threat both to them and their family. Well, you can see how that would create fear and then even hatred and division. Well, let's generalize about the unvaccinated, because you'll see that the experience is literally identical. So the unvaccinated, and again, I'm generalizing, but many of them honestly believed that the vaccine posed a lethal threat to both them and their family. Well, no problem. You don't have to take a vaccine in Canada if you don't want to, except that there was all this pressure, which was largely backed up by the vaccinated. And so you can see how it would create fear and how it would create even anger and hatred. And so we've all had this experience, which was surprisingly similar, but the difference is what we believed, what the facts were. And again, people are people. The one thing we learned at the National Citizens Inquiry is if we listen to each other's stories, we can come together. Because we're all just trying to do what's best for ourselves and our families based on what we believed. And so let's get back now to the political question that you had. I'm just saying, I'm hoping that we can transcend. It's 2026 and we have to come together. We've all gone through an experience, and regardless of where we were on the narrative, it was very traumatic for most of us. I think this whole nation needs to do some healing, and part of that is recognizing that many of those that took one for the team are in.
Canada's increasingly become an outlier among democratic nations when it comes to reviewing what happened during the pandemic. More than 30 democratic countries have launched significant COVID inquiries, including public commissions, parliamentary investigations, and independent national reviews. These include countries such as the United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, Sweden, Norway, Italy, France, the United States. Many G7 countries and many Commonwealth countries have recognized an event of this magnitude deserves careful examination. These reviews have looked at government decision-making, lockdowns, mandates, policies, vaccine policies, economic impacts, public health preparedness, and civil liberties concerns. They have not undertaken these inquiries because they all had the answers. They undertook them because their citizens deserve answers. Yet here in Canada, one of the most significant events in modern national history has never been examined through a comprehensive national public inquiry with the level of transparency and independence that many Canadians believe is necessary. That said, we're not proposing the national inquiry today. What we are proposing is something more immediate and accessible, an opportunity for Canadians to share their experiences, tell their stories, and ensure that their voices are heard.
All right. So this gentleman is mentioning 58,000 reported adverse reactions. Reported. Those are not just the cases that Canada actually experienced. 58,000 reported cases. Of those 58,000, 11,000 were serious. Like they call them serious cases, serious injuries that actually happened. These were reported. We're not talking about the ones that were not, and accepted. So there is evidence to prove that the vaccine actually caused injuries. Yeah. And now he's actually calling for an inquiry, or to say that let's look back at some of the policies that we implemented during the time, because we were forcing people. And of those 11,000, I can tell you that there were a lot of people that got forced because of their jobs.
Actually, take the 58,000.
Forced people. People protested and their accounts were frozen.
Yes.
For the same cause. So it's not we think people were forced. Those guys were trying to be very, very ambivalent. They were trying to be on the fence. Not really on the fence. They were trying to present the matter with a bit of
diplomacy.
But the truth is people were forced. In Canada, people were forced. People were forced in the United States. That's why some people in the United States Army had to resign.
Yeah.
because they were restated. You have to have been kicked out to be reinstated.
Of course.
True.
Good. So that just tells us exactly how far many of these governments went to. And many, many corporations went along with them. A lot of people, I'm not talking United States, I'm saying in African cities, in African countries, lost their jobs for that sake because they were working under the influence of these investors that wanted all their staff to be vaccinated. Is it South Airline, this popular one from the United States? They had to go look for pilots that were non-vaccinated because they were saying stuff. Pilots with vaccinated pilots. So, I mean, we can keep saying this on a repeat because it still feels some people still don't understand how this line cuts through the forest. They don't understand. They just still think a lot of things are coincidence. But please, please, beg your loved ones, because it looks like if you fell for that one and you're still not repentant, I wonder the hope for the other, for these ones they're floating around now.
Yeah, because they've
Hunter, I didn't even know Hunter is
a vaccine.
No. There's a word the documentary said. The meaning of Hunter as something that's deceptive in itself.
Yeah, it's deceptive, yes.
Yeah. So those who stood their ground for the first one don't have a problem standing their ground. Like their mind is already made up before the questions were asked.
Yes.
Yeah, we're praying for those who thought they escaped. I took it that nothing happened to me. I said, be God. Please don't go.
You know, it is befitting for Canada to actually do an inquiry into what happened during the time of COVID, because when you look at those 58,000 cases that were reported, mind you, these were 58,000 cases that were reported with 11,000 considered so serious or extreme that they will probably cause fatalities or they cause fatalities. If you look at those 58,000 cases, they are not the only ones because they dox the various kind of system that you get in Canada. And the reason why Dean Allison has actually come out to say we need to have a public COVID-19 inquiry is mainly because they want to actually get to the citizens on the ground to say, did you get any vaccine injury? Was it not recorded through the system? Because the system, they're trying to actually hide, the carnage of that system. So, so they're going back to the grassroots to say, okay, tell us what happened, bring your relatives and your friends and then your stories and, you indicate what kind of changes actually happened to your system. And I think when you look at what has actually happened to both the VAERS system in America and the equivalent that is actually in Canada, right? And then you look at what has happened in New Zealand, because almost all the Commonwealth countries, right? All the Commonwealth countries, they were trying to actually do something in terms of covering up. And what the citizens, particularly those who were interested in finding out, had to do was to call for a COVID inquiry. So you can look at the UK, their COVID inquiries where a lot of people go to find out this thing was causing a lot of carnage. And this is where you get the embalmers coming out to say, I handled these many cases. So it's almost like they are reverse engineering the whole process of reporting those cases. And doing it in such a way that in the future you won't have what actually happened in the first time actually happened to everybody else. And I think it's befitting at this point in time, especially considering that those who are running with the very idea of vaccinating, they have also come out with many other vaccines that are mRNA-based. Like right now, the health minister from Canada was blocked from telling their citizens what's the update when it comes to Ebola. At the same time, the systems that were used for COVID, which are also being used for Ebola, they have already been deployed, including in Canada itself.
Yeah.
So you get to realize, if you don't go for, you would say, a fact-finding mission of some sort, or a truth-finding mission, because this is actually a truth-finding mission where you're going on the ground to find what was the truth about the COVID-19, especially when it comes to the vaccines, and then you can say yes or no. And that's the golden standard of science when it comes to vaccines. Remember, they said you can test. Then they said at the speed of science, but it's now 6 years we can actually see what has actually happened, and you can come out with your own report. And I think if you look at the report that came from the COVID inquiry in New Zealand, it was too damning to such an extent that those who were involved, they went into the recesses, they hid themselves.
Yeah, they
include Jacinda. Jacinda had to disappear quickly, fast. And she decided to be on the climate side because she doesn't want to become answerable for what happened during the COVID-19.
Yeah.
And I think it's befitting for them to actually do so, especially when you have people like Tedros coming out again, Tedros is out again. We also have Fauci is also out again. And in this case, remember, there are screwworms that are said to be in America that also Canada said they have found some cases, because it looks like the mainstream media is ramping up these cases. And you know, the interesting thing is at the end of the day, all of them are going the same kind of measures that we saw in COVID.
Yes.
Quarantine, track and tracing, and you know, tools that don't serve their purpose like PCR test. And now they'll also tell you that we have got a vaccine. So suddenly Ebola is said to have a vaccine that is 4 months away. TB is also using, instead of using the cultures, they are now using a PCR test for them to actually test for TB. And then you have the tics and alpha-gal syndrome. All of them, the finality of it is what you see during the COVID-19 play. So it's either some people will be taken for quarantine, some people will be taken for vaccinations, some people will essentially also lose their narrative on the basis of misinformation and disinformation. So for them to call for it, I think it's very much befitting for the Liberal government that is now a majority.
Yeah.
You know, this is the right time for them to put checks and balances before they come up with something else.
Yeah, they've got to. And you, just before we actually came on air, you were telling us a story about some people that would not really listen to the men of God.
Yes.
Because they've got knowledge. And this
They
I
got
think
what they think.
is knowledge. Exactly. From school, academic. But here's the issue. When you've got a prophet of God, you need to actually suspend your academia or academic knowledge for this reason, because he says, I only speak the things that I hear the Spirit of God telling me that I should actually communicate.
Sure.
So when he is coming on board to actually communicate a message, and you are thinking, oh, let me actually look at this message with the lens of my academic knowledge that I've acquired over the years, you're actually doing yourself a disservice, because there is a testimony that you are telling us which is not really so positive,
Yeah.
which is that the people that actually decided, you know what, the man of God doesn't really know a lot. He's not
schooled.
He's not schooled in
Pharmacology, they said in pharmacy.
So pharmacology. So for that reason, we're not listening to him. And
Now they are sterile now.
They took the vaccine.
They took the vaccine, and it didn't take a long period of time. 3 days, the menstruation actually stopped, and it stopped for good. And this was a couple that was 6 months into their marriage. And they were.
Why did you say it's not for good?
No, because they haven't.
It's not for bad.
So you see, no, I get it. It's not for bad, for sure, because what they were expecting out of their life, which is their predetermined paths, might not actually be what they're experiencing. And probably it will take again the man of God to make a proclamation under the inspiration of the Spirit for that thing to be undone. Because as is today,
to be